Imagine walking into a new school on your first day, only to be slammed to the floor by the resident bully who thinks you're weak, quiet, and easy to target, never realizing you're the reigning national boxing champion with fists faster than his thoughts. What happens next will shock you, and if you love stories where justice hits back harder than a left hook, make sure you smash that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear will grip every viewer in the US, UK, and beyond. On the first Monday of September, when the hallways of Ridgeway High were flooded with the sticky sound of sneakers, gossip, and locker doors slamming like metallic thunder, 16-year-old Amara Cole stepped inside for the first time, shoulders relaxed, expression neutral, carrying nothing but a single backpack and an aura so calm it almost felt misplaced in a school notorious for chaos, cliques, and cruelty. But if there was one thing she had mastered, it was composure, years of disciplined training, controlled breathing, and laser-focused mindset honed in the ring where she wasn't just a competitor but the reigning national amateur boxing champion, a title she had won quietly, without fanfare, without bragging, and without needing the world to kneel before her achievements because she had been raised to move with purpose, not noise. Yet ironically it was the absence of noise that drew the wrong kind of attention almost immediately as she walked past a cluster of students who sized her up with the curiosity reserved for new arrivals, while others didn't even glance twice, too consumed by their own teenage dramas to care, until she passed him. Tyler Briggs, the walking stereotype of an entitled high school tormentor who believed the hall was his kingdom and everyone else existed merely as props in the spectacle of his ego, standing 6 feet tall, built more from reckless gym sessions than discipline, and surrounded by a crew whose laughter usually preceded someone else's humiliation, and today, unfortunately for him, his predatory eyes locked onto Amara the second he noticed her walking with an unshakable calm he interpreted not as confidence but vulnerability, misunderstanding her quietness as weakness, mistaking her composure for fear, and before she even realized she had caught his attention, he stepped directly into her path, forcing her to stop, sizing her up with a smirk that bore all the arrogance of someone who had never faced consequences, someone who had never been hit harder than his father's disappointment, and he leaned forward, blocking her way, saying, "New girl, huh? Where you think you're going?" In a voice dripping with the smugness of someone who had cornered countless students before, but Amara simply blinked, steady, unbothered, replying softly, "To class," which only irritated him because bullies never know what to do when their intimidation fails to produce fear. The hallway seemed to sense something simmering, a ripple of attention spreading as more students turned to watch, some whispering, others laughing already as if expecting a show, and Tyler, fueled by the eyes on him, puffed his chest in exaggerated masculinity, barking, "You don't walk past me unless I say you can." And Amara, still calm, replied with a simple, "Move, please," which struck his ego with the precision of a jab, making him step closer, narrowing his eyes, and before anyone could blink, he shoved his knee forward sharply, driving it into her thigh, hard enough to buckle most students, sending a loud gasp through the hallway as her backpack swung from the impact, and laughter erupted from his friends, but Amara didn't stumble, didn't fall, didn't even flinch the way he expected. Instead she absorbed the hit with that same terrifying calm, the kind that only trained fighters possess, the kind that should have warned him instantly that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. But Tyler, blissfully ignorant of the storm he had awakened, leaned back with a smirk of victory, expecting her to look humiliated, hurt, maybe even scared, unaware that the girl he had just kneed could dodge a 60-mile-per-hour hook from a trained adult fighter, unaware that she had broken punching bag straps in the gym, unaware that she had dropped grown men in sparring sessions when she was only 14, unaware that her body had been conditioned to withstand blows far harder than a hallway cheap shot from a high school bully, and Amara, her voice low enough that only he could hear, simply whispered, "I'll give you one chance to walk away," a sentence that stunned him for a moment, not because he felt threatened, but because it sounded too calm, too measured, too confident to belong to someone he thought was a nobody, and for one split second, a flicker of uncertainty passed across his face, but the presence of his crew and the watching students inflated his ego back to arrogance, making him bark out a laugh, "Or what? You gonna cry?" And with that, he reached forward to shove her shoulder. The moment Amara stepped out of Principal Hawthorne's office, after the entire school had buzzed nonstop about how she had flipped Tyler Briggs like a ragdoll without breaking a sweat, without throwing a punch, and with the kind of precision that looked almost unreal, she felt the weight of 1,000 curious eyes trailing her down the hallways like invisible spotlights, because news in Ridgeway High traveled faster than oxygen, and the story had already mutated into a dozen exaggerated versions ranging from, "She knocked him out cold in one hit," to, "She broke 3 of his ribs and didn't even blink," even though the truth was more controlled, more strategic, more humiliating for Tyler because she had overpowered him not with rage but with technique. something nobody expected from a quiet new girl, especially one who wasn't interested in attention, and as she made her way to her next class, her phone buzzing with new notifications from classmates she didn't know, she heard whispers following her like a shadow. That's her, the new girl who bodied Tyler. She's scary. No, she's a hero. I heard she's some kind of pro fighter. No, national champion. And while she kept her face neutral, inside she battled the familiar knot she always felt when people suddenly shifted toward curiosity or admiration, because she had never fought for applause, she fought for discipline, balance, and the promise she made years ago to her late father, Coach Elijah Cole, the man who had trained her with relentless love and unshakable belief, who had once told her, "Strength without control is chaos, but strength with discipline can save worlds," words she carried like armor through every training session, every match, every moment she felt the weight of expectations pressing against her ribs, and as she slipped into her English class, taking the only empty seat near the back, she noticed a girl sliding into the desk next to hers, a girl with copper hair tied in a messy braid, freckles scattered like constellations across her cheeks, and an expression that wavered between nervousness and excitement as she whispered, "Is it true? Did you really flip Tyler like a pancake this morning?" And Amara sighed softly, replying, "It wasn't like that," but the girl grinned anyway, sticking out her hand, "I'm Lily. And honestly, you're basically a legend now," which made Amara huff a short, reluctant laugh because Lily's energy was disarming in a way she wasn't used to, and before she could respond, the classroom door swung open and in limped Tyler Briggs. Bruised ego practically dragging him heavier than his swollen knee, the entire room going silent as he shot Amara a look so venomous it could have melted steel, but she didn't even shift in her seat, just stared back with calm that only infuriated him more, especially as whispers began rising, "He's scared, look at his face," she humbled him, and even their English teacher, Mrs. Keaton, hesitated before saying, "Mr. Briggs, please take your seat," and Tyler obeyed, jaw clenched so hard it looked like he might break a molar. But he didn't speak, didn't attempt to provoke her further, not yet, because humiliation can be a powerful fuel for revenge, and the moment class ended, he stormed out of the room, his crew following like vultures circling a corpse, but Lily tugged Amara's sleeve, whispering urgently, "Be careful, Tyler's not the type to let something go," to which Amara replied evenly, "I know," because she recognized the pattern, she had seen it before, seen boys like Tyler in the ring, in the gym, in competitions, fighters who confused aggression with strength, ego with power, and attention with respect, but she also sensed something else beneath his rage, something off balance, unstable, something that hinted this situation was going to spiral deeper than a petty hallway fight, and sure enough, during lunch, as she picked a quiet table in the courtyard, Lily joining her uninvited but welcome, a sudden hush spread across the crowd like a wave crashing into silence as Tyler climbed onto one of the benches, holding up his phone, voice amplified with vindictive satisfaction as he shouted, "Hey, everyone! Wanna see something funny? Check this out. Our new tough girl isn't just some random fighter, she's a fraud." And before Amara could react, he pressed play on a video he had found, dug up, from 3 years earlier, a grainy clip from a small amateur match where she had hesitated on camera, visibly shaken after her opponent fainted from dehydration mid-fight, the announcer shouting for help as teenage Amara panicked, guilt flooding her face as she knelt beside the girl, repeating, I'm sorry," even though she wasn't at fault. But the internet had twisted the clip back then, labeling her too emotional to be a fighter, a moment she had worked years to overcome, something she had deeply buried, and hearing Tyler mock, "Look at her, crying like a baby because someone couldn't handle a tap," ignited a quiet storm inside her chest, not of anger but of memory, grief, and everything she had spent years rebuilding, while students watched with mixed reactions, some confused, some sympathetic, some entertained, and Tyler, misreading the subtle shift in the crowd, went further, shouting, "You think she's strong? Please." She cracked the second things got real. Probably staged that whole fight today for attention, and as he continued spiraling into cruelty, he didn't notice Lily snatching his phone from behind and hurling it into the nearest trash can, shouting, "You're pathetic." Which shocked the crowd into gasps, but Tyler just laughed, cracking his knuckles as he stepped down and advanced toward Amara, saying, "You embarrassed me this morning. Now I'm returning the favor," and though Lily moved protectively in front of her, Amara gently pulled her aside, stepping forward with her shoulders squared, posture relaxed yet unmovably strong, saying quietly, "If you want to settle something, say it plainly," and Tyler, red-faced, snarled, "Fine. After school, old gym, no teachers, no rules. You and me," his voice trembling not with confidence but wounded pride, and Amara, after a long, measured breath, replied, "I don't fight outside the ring," which only enraged him further as he shouted, "Scared you'll lose without cameras? And she shook her head, saying, "No. I don't fight for ego," but the crowd heard only his version, the bait he dangled, their whispers repeating it like gossip wildfire, and Tyler smirked as he saw momentum tilt toward him, but what he didn't understand, what nobody understood, was that this wasn't about a fight anymore. This was about something larger, something connected to why Amara transferred schools, why her mother had uprooted their lives, why she had sworn to avoid unnecessary conflict, why her father's haunting final words still echoed through her ribs like an old bruise, and as she walked away from the courtyard, ignoring Tyler's taunts, Lily hurried behind her asking breathlessly, "Why didn't you say yes? You could destroy him," and Amara replied softly, "That's exactly why I won't." But as the day progressed, as eyes followed her, as pressure mounted, as rumors twisted her refusal into cowardice, she realized something darkly inevitable. Tyler wasn't going to stop, not until something forced him to, and fate, with its cruel habit of testing people when they least expect it, was preparing a collision far bigger than a schoolyard challenge, one that would unravel secrets, expose buried histories, and reveal that Tyler Briggs' anger was not rooted merely in humiliation but in a deeper resentment tied to a family legacy that intersected with Amara's life in ways neither of them yet understood. By the time the final bell rang, the tension in Ridgeway High felt thick enough to choke on, because half the school had already decided Amara would show up to the old gym despite her refusal, and the other half swarmed the hallways buzzing with predictions, arguments, and theories as if a championship match had been scheduled instead of a reckless after-school confrontation between a girl who hated violence outside the ring and a boy who didn't know the difference between fighting and flailing. Yet as Amara stepped outside with Lily at her side, her mind was a storm of old memories, her father sitting beside her in the gym late at night, telling her that power was nothing without restraint, telling her that every fighter faces a moment where walking away is harder than throwing a punch, telling her that the world would mistake calm for weakness but discipline was its own kind of strength, and she held those words tightly, wrapping them around her heart as she felt the gaze of dozens of students watching her walk through the courtyard where Tyler's challenge had been issued, waiting to see whether she would rise to the drama or step away from it. But fate, in its messy, inconvenient way, didn't give her the luxury of decision, because just as she and Lily turned toward the main gate, a panicked voice shouted from behind, "Amara! Tyler! He's in trouble!" And a breathless boy sprinted toward them, pointing toward the gym with eyes wide and terrified, saying, "It's his dad, Coach Briggs," he snapped. And the world seemed to tilt for a second because Coach Briggs, Tyler's father, wasn't just any adult on campus. He was the school's former boxing coach, long since suspended for temper issues, rumored to drink too hard, yell too loud, and ruin too many young athletes with impossible expectations, a man whose own failures loomed larger than his shadow. And without waiting for more explanation, Amara began running toward the gym, instincts kicking in faster than fear, Lily chasing behind her as the boy's frantic words spilled out. "He found out about Tyler's fight this morning, saw the videos, he's furious, I think he snapped at Tyler, he's hurting him, please hurry." And that was all it took for Amara to push through the gym doors, lungs burning, heart pounding, senses sharpening instantly as she absorbed the scene in front of her. Tyler pinned against the wall by a man twice his size but 10 times more unhinged, Coach Briggs' fist raised, his face twisted with the bitterness of a man drowning in his own failure, shouting, "You embarrassed me again. First you quit boxing, then you lose a stupid hallway scuffle to a girl, my son losing to a girl, do you know what they're saying about me?" And Tyler, bruised and shaking, tried to push him away, yelling, "Dad, stop, I'm sorry." But the man didn't stop, didn't hear, didn't care, lost in a downward spiral of ego and fury and self-hatred, and in that moment, Amara moved without thinking, stepping between them, catching Coach Briggs' incoming swing with one precise block, absorbing the shock through controlled form, her stance instinctive, steady, grounded, and for a moment the gym fell into stunned silence as his stunned, furious eyes met hers and he barked, "Get out of the way, girl," but she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't flinch, saying low and controlled, "He's just a kid," which only enraged him further as he spat, "A kid who ruined everything. You think you're some kind of hero? You caused this, you humiliated him, then the school humiliated me." And Amara's jaw tightened because she had heard the tone before, not from him, but from grown fighters who blamed children for their failures, from adults who used pain as a weapon instead of a lesson, from people who thought strength meant domination instead of control, and when Coach Briggs lunged again, this time toward her, she stepped aside with a swift pivot, guiding his momentum past her with the effortless ease of a trained athlete, making him stumble forward, cursing, and Tyler, trembling, gasped out, "Amara, don't, my dad, he's not he's not always like this, but the lie collapsed under the weight of the bruises blooming across his arms, the fear etched in his posture, the years of pressure written across his knuckles, and Lily, standing by the door, pulled out her phone shouting, "I'm calling the police." Which pushed Coach Briggs into full panic as he lunged toward Lily to stop her, but Amara intercepted him once more, her stance widening, her voice sharper now as she said, "It's over," because she wasn't afraid of him, not physically, not mentally. She had fought bigger men, stronger opponents, heavier hitters, but this wasn't a match. This was an intervention forced by circumstance, a moment where her strength wasn't about winning but about protecting, and when Coach Briggs threw a wild, untrained punch, she caught his wrist, twisted just enough to destabilize him, then swept his leg with controlled precision, guiding him to the floor with a technique so fluid the gym echoed with gasps as he hit the mat. Not injured, but stunned enough to stay down, staring up at her with an expression that flickered, just for a second, between rage, confusion, and shame. The police arrived minutes later, after Lily's urgent call, escorting Coach Briggs out as he shouted incoherent protests, Tyler watching with a conflicted expression, anger, relief, guilt, fear, because no matter how awful his father had been, watching him escorted out in handcuffs was a wound all its own, and when the officers asked questions, students trickled into the gym, some shocked, some whispering, some filming, until the principal arrived, dismissing everyone but Amara, Tyler, and Lily so she could piece together what had happened, taking their statements with a mix of gravity and fatigue because this was more than school drama now. This was a family crisis, a mental health emergency, a long brewing storm finally breaking open, and after the dust settled, after the gym cleared and the sun dipped low enough to paint the windows gold, Tyler sat on the bleachers, elbows on knees, face buried in his hands, and Amara approached him slowly, not as a fighter confronting an opponent, not as a girl confronting a bully, but as someone who recognized the weight of broken families, lost mentors, and expectations that crushed young shoulders, and when he finally looked up at her, his voice cracked as he whispered, "I'm sorry, for everything, for this morning, for the video, for all of it, but the words collapsed as tears he fought to hide rose anyway, and Amara sat beside him, not too close, but close enough to be real, saying quietly, "You don't have to explain. Just do better from now on," and Tyler nodded, swallowing hard, whispering, "I will," and Lily, ever the soft-hearted optimist, plopped down on his other side saying, "Good. Because if you ever mess with her again, I will fight you," earning the first weak laugh Tyler had managed all day, and in the weeks that followed, the school's view of Amara shifted from myth to mentor as students asked her about discipline, training, self-defense, and she found herself helping kids who had once been afraid of Tyler learn confidence, while Tyler, now in therapy, attending mandatory counseling sessions, and slowly piecing himself back together, approached Amara one afternoon asking, "Do you think you could teach me not to fight people, just to control myself?" And she agreed, not because she wanted an apology but because she understood what it meant to rebuild, to start over, to turn pain into purpose, and in the old gym where everything had nearly spiraled into tragedy, Amara began training Tyler with the same calm her father once used, teaching him not punches but patience, not jabs but discipline, not footwork but focus, and one day, as she stood in that familiar ring, wrapping her hands before a sparring session, she realized Ridgeway High was no longer just a new school, it had become a place where she wasn't running from her past but shaping her future, proving that the strongest champions aren't the ones who hit the hardest but the ones who choose when not to hit at all.